Uri. I also met you before. Yeah.
Uri, CEO and co-founder of Bloxroute. If you don't know Bloxroute, we're big in DeFi. We're infrastructure. We're propagating information. We run 2 of the largest MEV relays on Ethereum. We also run a block builder on BSC, also on Polygon, also stuff on Solana. Very deep in MEV and DeFi, not always agreeing with Flashbot that this is where we should be going though.
Cool. I love that. For background, guys, so I do not have the deep MEV background that Riposte and Uri have. You guys will run circles around me on the nuances of the MEV supply chain. The angle I'm coming at this from is a little bit more like financial mechanism design and where money is being left on the table, and trying to do pragmatic approaches to capturing that. Also, I am weirdly a decentralization maximalist. Trying to balance that with pragmatism along the way. The other people on this call on my team are Matt, who's like CTO, and Chris is kind of the lead researcher around the Oval design too. And yeah, I've actually worked with both of them for a long time. So that's that.
So Hart,
okay.
Hart, can I jump in and kind of like, in order to kind of like frame the conversation?
Yeah.
I think the idea is like, okay, there's Oval, and I tend to write like snarky posts, etc. But the idea is, oh, does it make sense for the protocol to capture some of the value? And that's totally fine. And what should be the way that it's done? So like, even if I criticize it and I say, oh, this shouldn't be the way, then the next question is, okay, what should be the way? Okay, so like, I'm not here to say, oh, this is bad, you shouldn't do any of it. Like, that's not even the angle I'm thinking or agreeing with. It's more like, listen, if you want to do this, I think there are way better ways to do it than you're currently trying to do it because A, B, C. That's kind of like where I'm coming from to the discussion. So does it make sense for me? I don't want to really kind of like recapture what I'm saying like in the post, but the TLDR is to say, listen, it makes sense, in my opinion. I don't like MEV auctions in general. I'm like a bit like RV Jules from Chainlink on that side. But if we have auctions right now, and I can't change that, and I don't have fair sequencing that works, and Mason is making me laugh, that if we can't have all of that, then we should at least, it makes sense for the protocol to capture some of the value, but you should be very aware of the nuance of what's happening here, because I think the choices you made for Oval, let's call them suboptimal. Okay, I think what you're doing, if you want this to be like UMA is awesome and you want it decentralized, etc., you're literally walking in the wrong direction. And the reason is, somebody wrote on Twitter like, I'm going to listen, but I'm not sure I'm going to understand it all. This should be super simple for anybody who's listening, right? The idea is that there is a transaction from Chainlink, which is the oracle, and kind of say, oh, here's a new pricing or whatever. And if this causes a liquidation, then you guys want to say, oh, how about we add a transaction, and that transaction, we auction it, so we capture the value. It doesn't all bleed to the validator, which makes sense. But I want to point out 3 things. One is that what you're doing is there is a transaction coming in. You send your transaction, or I wonder where do I want to start it. I want to start by saying you're making it more centralized than needed. Okay, you just like introduced 3 additional centralized entities to the flow. One of them is Oval itself. We're like, oh, here's the transaction. Let me send a transaction that would actually capture the value. So that's one, probably necessary. Then you send it to the Flashbot MEV-Share server, which does the auction for you. And then it creates a bundle, not like account abstraction bundle, an MEV bundle, which means like, oh, here's the transaction of like the Oval transaction, and here's a back running transaction, and let's give that to the builders. Now, you're trusting the builders to put them in that order. Nothing technically prevents them from breaking it apart, taking that transaction and capture that value themselves. So it moves to being like a flow, kind of like, okay, you send a transaction to a single entity, the MEV-Share server, which send it to the builders, who send it there, and like, yeah, let's just trust them to do what they're supposed to, and not break this entire thing. And this is a thing which is suboptimal. Okay, like this isn't great from where I'm standing. In addition to that, or stopping here, I don't want to hog the entire conversation, and I have the tendency to do that. But I was thinking, I was kind of jamming on this. This actually incentivizes. If I am the guy getting liquidated, and money isn't being bled to the validator, then I could censor this transaction from happening. I could put a bundle which pay the validator $10 or $100 or something if the oval price isn't updated. So I could prevent this from happening for, let's say, 3 blocks. Or even more pragmatically speaking, I am the validator 3 blocks away and I want to make that money. Then if I see 2 blocks ahead of me, like that there is an UMA liquidation, then I would censor that transaction once. And it's cheap because if I pay the dollar, like the validator $1, it's worth it for him, right? This doesn't bleed money to the validator auction. So let me try to make it more concise.
So
if it was a regular auction, then it's very hard to censor, let's say, a Chainlink transaction or something, because there's a lot of money in there. Somebody would pay the same amount you're willing to pay for it to get in. But the oval transaction, it doesn't pay anything. It pays, let's say, $1 to the validator. It doesn't bleed.
So I appreciate you saying you tend to hog the thing. So then I'll feel okay if I interrupt you a little bit, and I don't mean to be rude in doing that. I want to just step back for a second. So I think you have a specific attack that we should talk through, but I want to table that for a second until we get a little bit deeper, if that's cool. And then you also talked on there's sort of 3 trust assumptions. The trust assumption from Oval sending this transaction, which we can talk about. The trust assumption around MEV-Share, about them actually running this auction. And then the trust assumption that block builders won't break bundles too. And I think we should talk about all 3 of those. I want to say 2 things first. So I want to start off by actually framing what the problem is with liquidations today, and go a little bit more high level, just so make sure we're kind of eye on the prize, what we're trying to do here. And then I also want to talk about from my perspective, the fallback for Oval, about how Oval falls back to the current system. And what the trade-offs there. And I kind of want to just establish that, and then go deeper into these trust assumptions and the attacks. So Yuri, like you said, I think there are elements of this conversation that everyone should be able to follow along with. And I want to do that from I'm going to just use Aave as a concrete example. Aave does lending. We all know that. If somebody has an under-collateralized loan, or it drops below the health measure, the most critical thing Aave needs to do is sell the collateral. They have to sell the fucking collateral, right? Chainlink updates are the trigger that starts that sale, that triggers that sale. And what Aave does today is, because all they care about is getting that collateral sold, that's the single most important thing, they sell that collateral at a discount. They call this discount the liquidation bonus. I think it should be called the liquidation discount, but whatever, besides the point. They sell this collateral at a discount. That discount is between 5 and 10% of whatever actually the Chainlink price is. So you take the price, and I'm just going to use 10% because it's a round number, and we say we're going to sell this collateral at a 10% discount. There is no need for them to sell it at a 10% discount on almost every liquidation. It is too big a number. It's like setting a hard-coded constant in your protocol that says 10%, and it's too big a number. What we want to do is run an auction that says, what is the market clearing price to actually sell this collateral? Is it a 1% discount? Is it no discount at all? Is it a 2% discount? Whatever it is, we run that auction, and we capture the discount as MEV that we can then do useful things with, like redirect elsewhere. Let me actually pause there. Does that make sense? This kind of this framing.
I wanted to say so. I think it's a great framing, and I think like the important things are like it is critical for the protocol to sell it, right? It's kind of like the entire protocol. Everything could go bananas and everything could go down. Let's agree this is super critical, which is also why even the 3 blocks delay, worst case 3 blocks is a lot. A lot of things could happen in 30 seconds. So like it's not whatever. Also, it's 30 seconds in addition to however long it took for the Chainlink updates together. So it's an additional. But agree this is important, and also agree really doesn't necessarily require you to put the 10% there. So doing an auction, if somebody's willing to buy it at a 10% discount and somebody at a 9%, that piece, I think there's complete agreement. That makes sense. It shouldn't be that higher price. Doing an auction around it makes sense. I think like these are the 2 critical points, and I think on that there's agreement end to end.
Yeah, so let's agree that, because this is the type of thing when I'm talking to MEV nerds, I think the one thing that we'll all agree on is competition and market-based prices for things, good thing, right? So we want to set this liquidation discount at like a market-based competitive price.
Can we, before we go on too far, can we talk about like the Dutch auction solution and why that's, I mean, I don't think it's good enough, but maybe one of you wants to take that one down, because I saw some people posting about why not just use Dutch auctions.
I mean, Max, you're an economist, right? Like, what's the trade-off? I mean, I'm also like, I'm a former finance guy. I can kind of tell you some of my trade-offs here, but what do you think? Like,
basically, you're taking time to clear something that's very time sensitive, and the price can jump around. And
Dutch auction just takes time, right? It's kind of like, okay, the price move until somebody is willing to pay, and this is the sort of thing that you don't have time. Like, we need to sell, this is getting under collateralized.
Yeah, because like conditional on there being a liquidation, the local volatility is actually way higher too. So it's I mean, it's probably better than just like a flat 10%, but it also has its own flaws.
So as a searcher, I would say that Dutch auctions I tend to not like, just because the payoffs are smaller, right? So you're not really incentivized. You don't see these really big rewards and be like, oh, I need to get on this, I need to search this. So at least from that point of view, I would think generally competition would be less, and you'd maybe sort of run the risk of not getting these bots coming to liquidate your protocol in that case.
Yeah,
You
I
also,
think as an example, I was talking this past week with Alberto from Yield Protocol, and on their end, they designed a pretty elegant Dutch auction system that they ended up having to manually execute a lot of the time. So yeah, that just happens.
I think
The competition space shifts to being a latency race between the searchers rather than a like efficiency or capital issue.
Exactly, and it becomes like you still leak a lot of MEV unless you because these things are never going to be parameterized perfectly for every liquidation. So like there's always going to be some difference between the optimal price and the price, like the point at which that Dutch auction actually gets hit, and that you're gonna end up leaking anyway. So like you end up with this sort of challenge of like, how do you parameterize this thing such that you get the liquidation out quickly, but you have enough granularity to where you like don't still leak a ton of MEV to searchers who hit it at the right time.
But I think that the question becomes to Uri's point.
Wait, Alex, I'm just stopping you for a second. Like, this is a nerd sniping. Like, stopping you guys for a second here. Yes, we could do it this way or that way or whatever. And Alex, I'm actually like, I have like a note here, like you should be looking at Atlas, because I like your like mental. But we'll get to that in a second. Stopping here for a second. There is an auction, and you could say, well, let's do that auction, but like, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Like, should it be a Dutch auction or whatever? MEV refund, MEV refund, is that okay? Or like, is that important to go down that rabbit hole?
No, I'm good.
yeah,
Okay.
Uri, thank you for that point too, because I agree. Like, there's a much longer discussion around how protocols should get designed here. Let's say, like, guys, we could talk about that for a long time. I'm just going to say this is the way Aave and Compound are doing it today. they are liquidating collateral at a fixed discount. That full discount is getting paid in every liquidation, and it is inefficient. And so let's constrain ourselves to that being the problem that we are trying to solve.
But is it?
Yeah, Alex.
Because I mean, I think at the end of the day, the question becomes, one of censorship, right? And so, from the validator standpoint, any MEV that they would gain would be directly proportional to the liquidation bonus that the user is losing. I mean, they would scale linearly. The only way that scaling stops working is when you start reallocating it towards other parties, thereby incentivizing censorship. But I don't think the actual percentage bonus is a huge impact here, other than some minor friction issues.
But and the problem is
Impact
it goes to the wrong person, right? It's going to the validator, and it should be going to it's getting captured in an auction.
Yeah, but wait. But you guys are jumping like 2 steps ahead. We're going to get there. Right? It's kind of like we said, okay, there is a 10% discount. It's probably not the best one. We'll get into the allocation to who in a second. But there is an idea to say, oh, you know what would be a good idea? Instead of taking all that money and it's too high, the result is that the searchers take the 10%, then they compete on it. And so now all of that kind of like bleeds anyway to the validator. And that's kind of like pointless. Why would we bleed to the value? We put it at 10% and 5% would have been enough. Then all the searchers are going to bleed like 5% to the validator, and it's pointless. You might as well have taken that 5% and kept it for the token holders or the guy getting liquidated, which is like, you could probably do something better than give it to Lido and Coinbase and all the stakers in the world, which are making like giving it away and bleeding to them isn't good for the protocol or the user or anybody in the ecosystem. It bleeds, or let's leave it at that for a second. But agreement, I think, across the board, let's do something better. And then let me throw in there.
Let me actually just, we're going to make our assumptions here because we have a 62-person Google Meet, which I've never done before. So I'm just going to say, if you all disagree that, if anyone thinks that the validators should get paid this money, please leave the chat, right? Let's just make that be a starting assumption. If anyone else wants to talk about other ways that Aave should be doing liquidations, that's all valid, but again, not in this chat. We're going to say that they are doing this this fixed liquidation bonus, and those are our starting assumptions.
I guess until Hart comes back, the other question of what should protocols do? Do you guys think they should design sophisticated auction mechanisms, or should another layer on top be responsible for returning the money back?
I think in terms of that, at least the way we've been thinking about it to start with is to try and build systems that are compatible with projects that already exist. So there's already all this value being leaked by Aave and Compound today, and what can we do to capture this value in a meaningful way without them needing to re-audit their code? Obviously you could build MEV capture mechanisms directly into the protocol, and there's a lot of other solutions here. And that design space is really big, but to start with, how do we capture MEV on protocols that don't need to relaunch, re-audit, redesign their mechanism?
Yeah,
I inform this design decision.
I do agree.
Hold on for a second. Let's give Hart back the mic for a second.
Oh, he's back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you guys. First of all, I apologize. I absolutely hate that shit. We did this last minute, and I mean, we're all adults and understand the Zoom bombing thing, but come on, it's this is why you don't put shit on the internet. Uri, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were about to say.
Okay, so I was about to say that's kind of okay. There is an agreement there. If you just throw a parameter, then all the extra is just going to leak out anyway. It could be used better, so maybe let's do something better. And here's how I see what you guys did and my my issue with it. You guys said, well, there is an existing already mechanism. There is the Flashbot, and there's builders, and there's relays, and the entire PBS mechanism right now, which, to be clear, isn't that great. As somebody who runs 2 of the relays, you guys are basically trusting me not to unbundle all the blocks out there, not to do all sorts of stuff, and SCP or Wintermute or whoever. There's a lot of trust going around, whether you like it or not. So for all sorts of reasons. If you're a searcher, you don't necessarily trust.
just to be clear though, like that is the state of the world today, right?
Yes,
like,
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I just want to be clear that that is the state of the world today, and we're not like improving the state of that world. That's
No, absolutely. It's not your forte. It's not even what you do and focus on. Your idea, like I will take whatever tools I have out there to do my best. It's like I work in the MEV concept, like really deep in there, or Flashbots. So we think about ways to change it, but from your users of it. So what should you do in this setup? And I want to say, here's what I think you're doing, and here's what you should like maybe do differently. And maybe the biggest problem I have right now with it is that like there's also a new attack vector. But you guys say, well, let's auction it. I don't want to auction it myself. I don't want to build an MEV infrastructure. But there's already something out there, MEV-Share from Flashbot. And they have searchers. So how about we just give it to them, right? And they'll do the auction, and that's kind of it. And the way, but yeah, well, I was trying to talk with Chainlink, and I know other people had tried to speak with Chainlink about like, okay, them to do something about OEV. They want to throw the transaction in the mempool because they want it public and they want it as fast as possible. So with that setup, what you're saying, and like, please correct me if you think I'm wrong on anything, you say, oh, let the Chainlink transaction happen first. It's still in the mempool.
Can I do one thing before we get into the details here? Because the one other thing that I wanted to point out here, and there is some trade-off here, but in our system and in our design, after it's a parameter of the system, we call it the lock window. We think it should be about 3 blocks or 3 slots. But in our design, after that lock window passes, so fresh Chainlink price cannot be used by integrating protocol like Aave for that lock window for 3 blocks without going through Obol. But after those 3 blocks, we are identical to the current state of the world. So the one part that I just want to actually highlight is we think of this as a pretty elegant fallback system. We are inserting some stuff in that lock window, that 3-block window, but in our absolute worst case, and we can talk about inclusion rates and all that kind of stuff, but in our absolute worst case, after that lock window passes, we are just back to the way the world was before. Do you agree with that, Uri, by the way?
I mean, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, while we're on the topic of the 3-block delay, so I don't know too much about liquidation protocols, but presumably you will only update the Obol Oracle when there's a liquidation, right?
No.
So no, like Chainlink, like let's actually go. So Chainlink is publishing their price whenever they publish their price to the public mempool, right? And that's going to be publicly available as soon as that Chainlink price is mined.
Yeah, sure. But again, you have this 3-block delay. So the only time you're going to update it without the 3-block delay is when there's something useful, like a liquidation. So I guess this is my question.
That is correct.
So this is my question. Like, I assume the liquidation uses this Oracle for other things than liquidations. Is it important? Or does it matter that it's normally on a 3-block delay?
No. I mean, like, this is something we might, maybe there's some other protocol, but for like Aave or something, it doesn't. It would just mean that the non-critical or the non-liquidation use cases of like the Chainlink price feed and for Aave would be when you're initiating a position to make sure your position is over collateralized enough. And in that use case, Chris, go ahead. Sorry.
All that matters is that like the price is consistent within Aave. You don't want liquidations to use a different price to like creating and modifying positions that have margins. So increasing debt or decreasing debt. If you had a different price for that as liquidations or creating and closing was different prices, then you'd have a massive problem. But as long as it's a uniform price, it's fine. And assuming that price is not like so stale that you create like an under collateralized situation, right? If it's like delayed by 3 blocks, be that because of a lock window or the Chainlink price sits in the mempool for 3 blocks, it looks equivalent, right? So you can think about that delay the same as if it was just sitting in the mempool for 3 blocks.
So I don't know that I agree with, like, if I had to say, I'll go, okay, like 0x Taker and Kevin was here at least earlier. Like, they would know better than me. But 30 seconds isn't small. Like if I see price, I'm on the web, like I'm on other price or whatever, and I see, well, my health is 25%, and it actually isn't. It's like 15 because it went down. But I'm 30 seconds behind everything. I'm not 100% sure that this is completely negligible, not important.
Yeah.
So
Can I
flagging, not saying it's definitely not, but I'm not sure I buy into, that doesn't matter. We just use like delayed pricing.
So can I respond to that? And Chris, you can add to this too. So if Oval and MEV-Share connect to 90% of builders, which you guys can agree with, we should have inclusion 90% of the time in the first block, and then
The same block.
and you guys same block, I'm sorry, and then like 99% of the time in 2 blocks, and 99.9% of the time ish in 3 blocks. That's kind of where we're getting the 3 block thing from.
So let's get to that. But let's say, I think my point, I want to flag there that 3 blocks, not just using 3 blocks, which is not necessarily what you're doing. But if it was just like 3 blocks stale, always whatever, not necessarily negligible, nobody cares. I want to point that out.
Yeah, I think I get the way I think about that is it's equivalent to having like the issue that you're saying is like money market A uses a 3 block delay, money market B doesn't potentially, or other protocols use a different, like a more up-to-date price versus a stale price, and this creates like market dynamics that are bad, like, or toxic. The way I think about this is it's equivalent to having 2 money markets using 2 different price feeds, right? Like that doesn't create any like toxic dynamics today on chain. You just have like situations where one thing is updating before another, and unless there's like such a large discrepancy between those two venues, like you can borrow in one place for a much higher amount than another or something like this, it's not like functionally different to having like, Maker using Chronicle and Compound and other using Chainlink. It looks the same.
So let's continue the conversation. We can, I think, circle back to that. Not again, I don't think I agree, but let's see why. And I want to throw it out there that I think that I could have a profitable service always putting a stick in your wheel, and it's always to be delayed, and we'll get to that. So like, we'll get to that in a second. But let's say, putting that aside, you say, okay, let's do the auction, let's use the current mechanism, and we have like the lock window, which means worst case scenario, it comes in 3 blocks later. And I want to say why this isn't necessarily, or what are the issues I see with the current setup, what maybe you could be doing differently, and even a way that this could go, like, doesn't work, not like potentially never ever work. Okay, so starting with the following. In the current setup, no Oval, no nothing, then the Chainlink transaction goes in, and then whether it's Aave, whether it's something else, everything just works. It doesn't matter where that transaction was included, by which builder, through MEV Boost, not through MEV Boost, or whatever. No single entity has that much power. Even Chainlink itself is decentralized and used as a community, if I remember correctly how their system is set up. This is vanilla. And now you guys come and say, okay, whenever that transaction happened, and you said, well, it just stays 3 blocks, maybe the Chainlink transaction stays for 3 blocks in the mempool. A, that doesn't happen a lot, but B, it also means it stays an additional 3 blocks. Okay, so if the Chainlink transaction was stuck for 3 blocks before it got included, then this is now potentially another 3 blocks, so 6 blocks after it. So it's not one and the same, but now you have 3 new components that you have. You have your component, and Arbitrum are great, okay, but their centralized server went down when things went out. Like, running a centralized server is less redundant and less, like, it could fail, it could be attacked, like a million stuff could happen. So you have your server, which can like wait to see it in the mempool or in the block or whatever, and say, oh, let's create the Oval transaction. The Oval transaction is now the real update. It basically says, oh, look at the Chainlink update, but now this is the transaction where the backrunning happens. This is where the MEV exists, etc. You take this transaction and you send it to the Flashbot MEV-Share server, also a single server. I think running on SGX, but again, same problem that you could have with your server could happen with their server in terms of like it goes down, it doesn't work, whatever. MEV-Share server, give it to all the searchers, offer to create like a backrunning opportunity, create a bundle, not account abstraction bundles that has operation as in an atomic transaction. No, it creates just basically 2 transactions and give it to the builders, right? This is an MEV bundle, give it to the builder. Now, there is a trust in the builder. You give it to the builder and you say, well, I really hope they don't break it and introduce their own transaction or do something else. They probably won't, right? Because rsync is making a lot of money, and Beaver is making a lot of money, and Titan is making a lot of money, but less. So they should be okay with it. Here's one externality which I'm not sure you understand, or isn't naively clear to anybody who's not deep in MEV. If you give it to a builder, okay, let's say a subset of builders, give it to the 3 big ones to get included, you kind of enshrine them, okay? This is like, if they have another, even if it doesn't have any MEV in it, just the fact that they have this transaction and it pays like fee, so let's say it pays $1, then all the other builders need to pay a higher amount of the MEV they capture just to be equal. So if you give it to a subset of the builders, these builders are now privileged. They could capture more money than others, or they'll win more blocks compared to the others. So I honestly don't know how Flashbot decide to which block builders to give it or not to give it. But it's either, oh, they give it to everybody, which puts you in like, okay, if it gives it to everybody, then somebody could, liquidation is super jittery, right? Liquidation could be really, really big money. So if I give it to everybody, then a builder and a non-build, I'll build a builder, I'll wait for the opportunity, I'll break that opportunity, I'll capture the money, I'll unbundle it, right? Or if they give it to very few builders, then these builders are now kind of like enshrined. So your system, pardon my, yep.
No, so, I mean, just to be clear and level set on some of the stuff, like, so I'll use the word searcher and liquidator interchangeably here, because like they are a searcher, but they're the ones doing the liquidation here. In the current world, they also choose their set of builders they send this to. Correct? Right?
Choose is a strong word here. If you're a searcher, you're going to send it to the big builders, because if you don't, you lose money. Right?
You lose inclusion.
You can't afford not. Yeah. If you're not giving it to Beaver and Beaver builds 25% of the blocks, then you're missing out on 25%. You don't really have a choice. It's not whether you like them or trust them. You have no choice. You have to trust them.
Yep. Okay. So I'm just trying to understand from your perspective the difference here in what you're articulating, where like, so MEV-Share, and like to be clear here, what Oval's piggybacking off MEV-Share for, it's really one thing and one thing only. Maybe this is not quite fair, but the real thing we're piggybacking off of them is the reputation Flashbots has built to enforce the refunds that they're requesting, right? And I should be explicit about that, where we're trying to piggyback off, and actually Matt and Chris, interrupt me if you disagree, but we're saying, hey, MEV-Share is going to fan out this bundle to a set of builders. You can pick that set of builders that you want this thing to fan out to, and I think Flashbots has some defaults here too, that Matt and Chris, you can update me on. I agree with you on this, like enshrining and all the things you're talking about here, and I also agree that if you do send it to an untrustworthy builder, they could do bad things and break your, like, unbundle stuff and all this shit that we don't want them to do. But we are piggybacking off of MEV-Share to enforce the refund percentages that these builders will send the refund back to the address specified. Does that make sense to you, Uri?
It does. It completely, and kind of like makes sense why you're going that route. But like from the top of my head, I want to tell you kind of like 2 things. We have here Alex from Fastlane here, who I'm friendly with. That's a It has a system called Atlas. Okay, basically using account abstraction. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. TLDR, instead of Oval single server and the MEV-Share single server and trusting the builder, I think the idea is for it, you guys are about to make the transaction, you have the Oval transaction and you decide you want to do it, you be the auctioneer, get Serger to try to back on it, and you create one atomic transaction and throw it in the mempool.
I think,
okay? No single server, no single builder, just throw it out there. So you could have, like, the auction still happens if you decide this is the path that you want to take, but this is now a single atomic transaction going to everybody out there, which is kind of like, okay, this is the Oval transaction and the piggybacking back run to pay the money. So it's kind of like somebody liquidate and pays you back. Let's say it's $100, it pays you 95 back. I don't know what the number is, but it's a single transaction which doesn't go through this flow, because that flow isn't a good thing. It's a bad thing. Kind of like how Chainlink throw their transaction into the mempool and everybody could put it out there. You could capture all that value without going through MEV-Share and through the builders. You could potentially, and that's like, you know, that's like his solution. I'm sure there are other solutions out there you could be working with, but that's piece number one, which I want to tell you. The other piece is worse.
Yeah. Let's step in on this point here. There's two things that I want to talk about here, because I think this is really interesting. Piece one is the enshrinement of builders and the trusting of builders. Flashbot's system is fairly open. I'm not going to say it's perfectly open, but you can basically make a PR on Flashbot's kind of decentralized order flow working group repo and basically say, I will support these APIs, and you're basically agreeing to follow their rules. So anybody can open that PR, and then all of a sudden you're kind of supported by this whole system. Oval is not planning to discriminate on builders, and we're planning basically to send it to everybody who kind of fits into that MEV-Share agreement. So in terms of enshrining like the top 4 builders, that's not something that we're trying to do, but the barrier to entry is that you have to implement those APIs. Number 2, technically you don't actually have to go through MEV-Share, the MEV-Share server at all. We can send this stuff directly to builders, and it's sort of a thing that we've talked about doing and are seriously considering doing, just to kind of remove that hop. Number 3, I think your third point, the other point you made about like, well, like, can't you run the auction instead of the builder? I think this is a really interesting point, and I think it has some failure modes, and I'm sure the folks at Fastlane like have really thought deeply about this. But with the nice thing about asking a builder to do this is that when they build their block, they sort of know what will succeed and fail. So you don't have to worry about reverting transactions. You can basically pick, the auctioneer is the same person who constructs the block. Whereas if you try to run an auction separately, if you try to run it on your own and then ship it off to a block builder, you don't have that synchronization. And so you end up losing that revert protection. Yeah.
That's not true. Disagree with a few pieces here. Going to the first point is in terms of enshrining, not enshrining builders. I assume you or most people here have heard of Sandwich the Reaper, later called Low Carb the Crusader, the guy who really basically for the first time unbundled the block. Okay, he ran a malicious validator. He kind of like signed something, but in a way that doesn't work. But the important thing is the idea that he unbundled the block, and there's tons of value in unbundling the block, especially when it comes to sandwiching, because then you take just the first transaction of the sandwich and put the other one around. People lose a lot of money. If I go and I create a non-builder and kind of that, and it's either I have to KYC and okay, who I am and trust me to do it, or let's say I run a builder. You either allow me or don't allow me. Now, the 3 big ones. Actually, the 3 big ones are your safe choices because they actually play long games. But if there's a $50 million liquidation and they could be making $5 million, then most of the builders out there, some of them are anon, a good chunk of them are anon, especially one, they'll be willing to bid higher for this thing. Okay, so to an extent, if I am willing to break the rules, then when the time comes, there comes this bundle. If Beaver included, it increases its value by a bit because again, they're not capturing the value. The value goes to the protocol or Titan or rsync. But if I'm willing to cheat and unbundle this, then I'm about to make $5 million. So I would unbundle it. I would create a block that pays the proposer. I would pay the validator $500,000. I win the auction. So this is a game in which actually the more you have, the more, like it's 1 out of n. You need one bad apple to participate in there. So when the time comes, he steals the money and he disappears. So you really don't, from my perspective on that, don't have much of a choice. You either really just give it to those entities you trust and you enshrine the trusted entities, or you're open up to the fact that this is getting unbundled and something bad happens. And something bad means the money doesn't go.
Can I actually, because I think I might actually understand what you're saying, but I want to just do the dumb thing and try to regurgitate it back to you. So scenario here is there is some very spiky MEV, and we're going to call it like for liquidation. I'll just pick a big number. It's like a $10 million liquidation, right? Which, first of all, is exceedingly rare. That doesn't happen very often, but
liquidation is played for that game, right? It's the USDC depeg, it is the Luna. These are the scenarios that make 90% of the money.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's 90. Like they make big money, but we can look at this. There's some power law distribution. How steep it is, we can debate, and we can pull the data and look at it, right? So I just want to say that there's this like $10 million thing. And you're saying now, if it's known that the searchers are sending their a wide range of builders, including an untrustworthy builder, and we'll make this be a hidden untrustworthy builder. They haven't shown their cards yet. They've been sitting around waiting for this opportunity, right? That untrustworthy builder who is planning on unbundling this bundle to capture the $10 million of MEV for themselves, what they will do is, and this is where I want to make sure I understand it, they might not be, they will like pay to win, they'll buy an empty block, right, from the current slot. Here's where I want to understand.
So let's,
now, how does it work?
Let's break this piece down because it's super simple, okay? What a bundle in MEV is just you send the builder, oh, here's a list of 2 transactions, put them in this order, either include them or don't include them, but like don't just put one of them or play around with it. Okay, it isn't technically, like nothing prevents you. This is a single transaction and another different transaction. And what the builder could do, just create, you know, let's say Beaver is a valid good builder. He built a block. It's worth $100 because he didn't capture that $10 million. Then this guy built exactly the same block, maybe slightly not as good because he's not a good of a builder. But he takes that single bundle, which has 2 transactions. One of them is the oval, one is the background transaction, and he removes the background transaction, which takes or liquidate it and pays 95%, and put their own transaction, liquidate, and take all the money to yourself. And so the builder would run the code, which acts good as long as any liquidation MEV is smaller than $1 million. Once it's more, unbundle, steal, close shop, fly to Taiwan.
And move on. Okay, so then what you're saying is the risk here for this attack, and I think this is where you're worrying now about, call it like the enshrinement of builders, is that you are arguing, if I understand correctly, that this design inserts more trust in builders, like to not unbundle. No? Yes? No?
It's not exactly. So what I'm saying is you're going to have to put some trust assumption. Like you're going to trust some of them. Top 3, top 5, this guy and that guy. But you're going to trust some and you're not going to trust all. You don't really have a choice here. Otherwise, you'll get screwed as we just described. So let's not talk about the situation where this like rare MEV spike happens. Let's talk
about because I want to put this to bed for a second, right? Because like the thing I still want to get back to is like I want to understand how this is any different, and maybe Matt can jump in here too. I want to understand how. I want to understand how it's any different from currently. Like currently, with the current Chainlink searcher sending things to MEV boost type thing, I want to understand how this bad builder wouldn't do the exact same thing they currently do. And Matt, please jump in here too.
That's exactly what I want to say. I want to say that the bad thing that's happening here doesn't happen in this unbundling thing. Like, this is the danger, which will cause you to act in a certain way, and where you act the normal way day to day, that's actually the negative externality. Let me break that down.
Wait, I don't understand that.
Give me 3 sentences to put end to end, okay? Fair? Right now, there is such a risk that you really are going to have to choose which builders to choose and which and give it to them, and which not give it to them. You can't give it to an anon you don't know, because he will steal your MEV when it spikes. So you're going to make a choice. I trust A, B, C, and D, and I don't trust the rest of them. That's piece number one, and that is similar to how it's happening right now, day to day. Like, I'm not saying it's any different from the current setup.
Okay,
but
good.
Now here's the thing. On a day-to-day basis, not when the MEV liquidation spikes, day-to-day basis, these builders now get private order flow from you guys. They're going to include updates from Oval, and other builders are not going to get them because you trust A, B, C, and D. They're going to get these regular day-to-day updates every block, every 2 blocks, every 10 blocks, whenever the updates come.
Whoa, hold on though. Like, this to me, I don't understand the difference from the current state of the art, right? Currently, if you're a liquidator doing, like, sending your in current system, no Oval, no whatever, you're currently sending your bundles for liquidations to your set of builders. Like, that's what you're doing. If you send it to somebody untrusted, correct, when you do have a liquidation bundle, they'll unbundle you and steal the MEV, which is the same as today. So
but here's the difference. Searchers don't create the initial opportunity. So some searchers trust these builders, other searchers trust those builders, but they're not the source of the original transaction that creates them. So they can't prevent other searchers from getting to somewhere. They're not they're all trying to search, they send it to bundles. But again, I asked for 3 sentences and I only put 2. So let me put the final one, which would make it all make sense. Oval, because it is the generator of the original transaction, means that these transactions on the day-to-day normal way of affairs go only to these 4 builders. They're not super important. There's no super high liquidation in them. Regular everyday operation. But these builders now have this private order flow, which is very important. Why? Because let's say these are just normal transactions. They pay $1 every time they execute. That means that these builders now each have 1 additional transaction. It pays $1 additional dollar. So they, compared to all the builders that don't have access to it, they're now favored. Okay, they could either take $1 more dollar. Okay, if everybody see $100 worth of transactions, but they see 101. So either they keep $1 to themselves, or they bid $1 up and they always win. So you just now created, not in the extreme case, in the day-to-day case, you created private order flow to the large builders, making them even slightly, they're already better than everybody else, and now they're even more better by $1 per block.
Okay, so I think that was more than 3 sentences for a second, but
yes. I lied.
Yeah. The thing that I don't get logically, and I'm coming at this from not the deep MEV expert, but I don't understand. We go from the fact that without Oval, searchers are sending their bundles to some set of builders. And I don't understand the logical leap here where there's anything different here, where searchers are still sending their bundles to the same set of builders.
Because Oval isn't a searcher. Oval is the originator of the transaction that has MEV. So searcher can't affect where this transaction goes. Whether, let's say there isn't any MEV, there's no backrunning worth doing. It's just a regular transaction, pay regular fee, paying $1 each.
But you,
Searchers don't create.
stop, hold up. You don't use Oval then. Like, you just don't use it.
But you have to use
Every
it
time that
every block, right? I mean, you can't just say only using it, on.
No, like Max, like the way this would work is you would just so Oval inserts this unlocked transaction. It's like an RPC endpoint. You start this unlocked transaction. But if there's no MEV to capture, you just so you send it to Oval, your transaction will simulate and succeed, versus you send it to other ones and it won't succeed until that 3-block window passes. But if there's no MEV to capture, don't use it. There's probably slightly higher gas costs. There's nothing to do here. You would just wait the 3 blocks.
Okay, so you're
there's no
saying
point.
So you're saying, well, listen, we don't actually send transaction on Oval when there isn't MEV, which again, we're going to talk about that more, but we just make everything slower by 3 blocks all the time, except when there's an MEV liquidation opportunity thing. Does Oval send a transaction constantly on a regular basis to to update it, or only when there's a liquidation about to happen?
So the flow is
Matt, what? Yeah, Chris.
So the flow is that a searcher will send their bundle to the Oval node, and it will prepend this unlocked transaction to their bundle, which is then forwarded to MEV-Share. So there is no sending of when a liquidation happens or when an update happens. That's not the trigger. The trigger is effectively every bundle that is sent to the Oval node has this transaction prepended to it. And the implications of that are quite far. And it's part of why the mechanism is designed like this, because those bundles are then forwarded to the builder, where the builder is running the auction. And in all situations except for where the Oval transaction is needed to create a liquidation, those transaction bundles will use more gas than the vanilla version of this, right? So the assumption is that the searcher is going to be sending it to the Oval node as well as directly to Titan and Beaver and all the other builders. And our bundles are basically worse in all scenarios except where there's a liquidation. And then in those scenarios, it's a superior bundle. So that's kind of the framing, that we're not creating these unlocked transactions proactively. They happen.
And actually, Chris, I might add something that is not something I've fully thought about before, but this Oval transaction, the Oval transaction that we prepend, that has a small gas cost. So in a sense, if there is no MEV, you actually wouldn't want to send through the Oval endpoint. You actually are going to have a slightly increased cost. You'd rather not do that if there's no MEV to capture.
But you cannot pay 3-block late Oracle updates on a product that can be used to short the token price. You cannot do that, because it's 3 blocks late. You can take out a loan at 3-block late prices and make a ton of money, because you're taking out a loan with block extra.
No, you can't. Max, none of these lending protocols.
You create money. Yeah, we've
Yeah, remember, guys, there's a big difference here between where you can initiate a position in Aave and where you liquidate a position. They designed this very carefully, so you can't do that. Because Max, you could imagine that being true too for just literally censoring a Chainlink public mempool update if something like that were possible. So this is covered by the Aave mechanism design itself.
How does it work then? What
so you have to initiate your position with 150% collateralization, and then you get liquidated at 130%.
No, but what's the rate at which you trade?
So the precise mechanism is that the assumption that Aave makes is that the delay in the price update won't be that the price won't change more than the liquidation buffer within the delay. So if you have, that's the core assumption. You will always be able to update the price quickly enough that the market doesn't become under collateralized. And the same thing is true here, right? So as long as the price of the if it's 150% collateral requirement, for example, then the assumption is that the price is not going to move more than the required amount for it to become under collateralized in that 3 second.
But you can make money off a loan if you take out a loan and pay it back if the prices move, right?
No, not in this.
No. So Max, look, let's just do this with concrete arguments. Like I can put in $150 of Ethereum, and that's my minimum. I don't exactly know what these numbers are, but I have to put in at least $150 of Ethereum to borrow $100. I will get liquidated only when my $150 of Ethereum is worth less than, let's say, $130, right? So there's nothing I can do here to make money by like there's a $20 buffer here. There's no free money machine here where I can like initiate a position and then censor the price. I have to censor it for a crazy long amount of time in order for me to like make free money.
But like,
I'm not
assuming
sure.
that you have to get liquidated to realize, like, you have to like not repay the loan to make money off the loan, but you can repay the loan, not get liquidated, and still make money off the loan, right?
I don't like. I mean, you can bet on the market, right, by going up or down, but there's no.
No, what Max described doesn't work.
Yeah, Max, I really could walk through these cash flows with you. I'm very confident, and this has nothing to do with Oval. This would be like censoring Chainlink prices in Aave. I'm really confident that this there's no free money option on this.
I'm not sure. I might be with Max there or not, but putting it aside for a second, I want to answer Matt's B and C points from earlier in the sec, but I want to say, if what you're telling me, the way you describe it now, you're basically, and I don't like Max, like I think that basically you're saying, well, while there's no liquidated, we're 3 blocks behind. Pricing is now 3 blocks late, and it's fine. Now, I'm not sure I agree with it's fine. I think that's kind of the thing that Max kind of like brings up. It's kind of like, if prices are stale, I should be able to make money off it. I'm putting this with a question mark aside, but the way you describe, hold on.
No. This is important, useful. You're coming back to this, right? Guys, remember where Chainlink prices are coming from here too. Like, what is Chainlink's like basically SLA? They're saying we're going to give prices every hour or every 1% price move. Like Chainlink prices are super granular. Like they're very lossy here.
Stale.
So keep in mind,
they're always stale. Like almost always, mainnet Chainlink prices are stale.
Right.
But you're adding, but you're adding
Catfish
3 blocks.
Updated me like on Ethereum, the ETH/USD price is tighter than that. Yeah, it's 0.5% on certain assets, and then you guys are in the chats correcting this. So I just want to say Chainlink prices are always delayed by some amount. So I think we are going to get lost in this argument if we're talking about delaying prices.
I want to put it aside and go back to Matt's 2 other points. But basically, the way you describe it to me now, which kind of like negates my first point regarding about enshrining block builders, is you say, listen, in general, while there isn't a liquidated, this is just like, okay, we're just now 3 blocks more behind. We're not going to create an oval transaction. So it's just going to be the Chainlink pass through, but everything just now comes 3 blocks later. And there's a question mark, is that super important or not super important? But as long as this doesn't happen, it doesn't affect the block builders as much. But I want to bring up 2 points. Matt, you said earlier, listen, you don't want to run the auction, and what if they revert, etc. I don't want to pitch like Alex should be here, speak with him, like Atlas isn't my system. But the idea is like, it basically works with operations. So it creates a single transaction and puts all the bids one after the other. And if the first one reverts, it pays your gas and you move to the second one. So the entire thing is about like super cool. I got excited about it. I think it's better than most systems, but he could pitch it better for you. But I want to tell you why your system would never work, and it would always be 3 blocks later and pass through. I have a product which I'm selling to validators. It's called the Validator Gateway. It helps them to hear about information fast, etc. They are my customers. If you guys are doing as you said, it's like, okay, let's have all the value leak to the protocol. So the oval transaction, if I am not the current proposer, but 3 blocks from now, so then I would run a bot, or better yet, Blockstart would run a bot for all the validators, which are our customers. If there is a liquidation 3 blocks ahead of me, then I would add a bundle to the block and say, I would pay the builder $10 as long as the oval price isn't included. So the price didn't change.
So
if I
think I get the censorship point you're making, and I think I have a response to it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this argument. So you're basically saying I would like, what if I'm going to get liquidated, or I just don't want, or if I'm a validator and I want to get the money from instead of it going back to the protocol, I would just pay block builder some de minimis amount to sort of censor the oval thing until later. But I think the problem with that approach is the oval transaction is actually included with the searcher bundles that are trying to do this liquidation. So I think that would, if you pay, you'd have to pay a lot of money to actually do that. The builder is actually having to choose between your censorship transaction, which, by the way, you'd have to do for all 3 blocks, and the amount, the percentage of that auction that actually still goes to the builder / validator, which is not nothing, right? It's at least 10%. That's a parameter you can play with, but right now we have it set at 10%, which is what Flashbots recommends. But you have to exceed that amount, right? For 3 blocks,
right? So if it's 10% that you're giving, it's a $100 opportunity, you're paying $10. Then the validator in block 4, who knows he's going to be in 4 blocks, can pay $10 to each of the guys to censor it and get a $100 opportunity on their block, right?
And pay 11, but I agree. So Matt, Matt, I was thinking from, if I'm getting liquidated, could I prevent this from happening? Basically, it's now cheap if the money doesn't go to the validator. And in general, I don't want it to go to the validator. But I don't like the MEV auction mechanism. I am the most outspoken person against it. But in the current mechanism, if my first thought was I'm getting liquidated, I will put a bundle, just stall. Okay, Alex is also the biggest opponent to MEV auctions. But my first thought was, if I'm getting liquidated, price goes down and then it would go up. Let me just try to stall it for 3 more blocks, give it 30 seconds. Maybe price would bounce. You throw good money after bad. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. But because the money doesn't go to the validator, it's possible. But that's the small problem. The big problem is not from the guy getting liquidated trying to avoid it. The big problem is from the block from 4 blocks from now. Or again, I have everybody are my customers. I would do it for them. So I Lido and Coinbase.
I think there's a fairly easy fix to this sort of collusion. It's just to raise that percentage to the number of blocks. So if you had a 4-block delay, you do 25%. If you do a 5-block delay, you do 20% or whatever. And if you hit that percentage, then this sort of payment makes no sense. I also think it takes a lot of coordination and a lot of technology to get there. I don't think that validators are acting perfectly economically today.
No. So in terms of it requires 0 collaboration. I could do it. I run the service for them, and if I make the money by delaying for 3 blocks, they pay me 1% of the money I make them, and I don't need to collaborate with anybody. I just send a bundle.
It's possible here that what you're saying, though, is that the lock window and the builder percent payment should be correlated. This is what Matt's saying. So if we have a 10-block lock window, then a 10% builder payment means there's no free lunch here. You would have to pay 10% 10 times. And you'd pay the total MEV away. There's no point in doing this. And you have to have it perfectly coordinated, which maybe you can do because you're running the relay and you do perfect coordination with these builders here too. Or you do a 33% payment and you do a 3-block lock window. There could be an interesting point there. But I still think it solves it.
So I was actually, I didn't, so I'm glad about this conversation. I didn't think you're paying anything to the to the proposer. So the fact that you do that, from my perspective, you could capture some of it, but you're going to have to pay. I was at the back, I was thinking 15%, 20. You'll need to pay something to make it not economically make sense for basically just builders stalling this from happening so they get the entire thing.
Yeah. Okay. But
I'll
I think
add
I
one
will.
more thing on this.
Excuse me.
Yeah, let's
go
add
ahead.
Alex, but Matt, wrap up your point, and then Alex,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
My
your
other
thoughts
point
here.
about this is that like when you actually have these liquidation scenarios, right? We talked about like liquidations being correlated with price movement. There's also liquidations being correlated with block congestion, or with congestion on chain. And so you actually do have to think pretty carefully about how much you give to the builder to make sure that there's still enough incentive in there to get included when blocks are pretty full. That was all I was going to mention. But yeah, agreed. Totally agree with your point, Yuri.
Alex, I'm afraid with whatever you're going to say right now, but let's go.
Okay, so I just have a question for Uri about the censorship strategy that he mentioned a couple of times. So, is it supposed to work though? Because you can submit the bundle, but the builder can always include the bundle ahead of the OVA's transaction, right? So in that case, you will not know whether it's included or not. It will just be included after the transaction. So it seems really tricky unless you really buy out the blocks in the entire.
Yeah, just make a really big transaction with 30 million gas.
But then if you really start buying
No.
out,
Yeah, that won't make, you know what? Maybe it would make sense for the 30 million, but that's a good point, Alex. But there is already a way with multiple builders to do bottom of the block like bundles. But I agree with you. It's kind of like it's not just regular bundle. You want to send it to them to be put at bottom of the bundle. But we saw people who did it. I don't remember, but somebody already found a way to kind of to put their block at the bottom, even if the builders don't do it for them. But I agree. It's a good point.
I think that the whole thing would benefit significantly from sort of the opportunity to introduce an additional payments to the validator. I think that would probably be just, resolved right there. So I think that that's this censorship things. I'm sympathetic to the argument. I know that Max is here. He made great points about censorship, but it's not actually as easy in practice, in particular when you start talking about things like censoring for 3 blocks. I'm not sure it's as easy to do as it sounds.
Well, if those have to be MEV-boost blocks, it's easier than if you are going to get them in through the mempool, then it's harder because again, there's like a 10% chance, 10% chance, 10% chance not a MEV-boost block. But if it has to be MEV-boost blocks, then it's pretty easy.
I think the bigger problem that we are not addressing, we are talking about the MEV, but this is OAV, and the Oracle is at the core of this entire thing, which is Chainlink. And if they want, they can stop this at any time. Why would they give a share to UMA? And like I saw the Aave proposal. You guys proposed taking a 35% cut and giving 15% to Chainlink. Why will they not come in and take 100%? Like, what is stopping them from doing that?
Yeah, Ashar. First of all, it was kind of interesting. Like we shared that Aave proposal for a little bit of feedback from Mark Seller, and I'm really surprised he posted it. So I don't know, that wasn't polished, but here's my take, and this is coming from direct feedback. This is going in a bit of a different direction, and I actually want to make one other point. Right now, Chainlink isn't getting paid enough. Like, they're doing a lot of work. They're paying millions of dollars in gas, and they're not getting paid for the service they provide, in my opinion. And one really useful way to pay them is to capture the MEV that is going to validators and redirect it back to them.
100%. Yes.
And I will say that I think this is a really useful long-term sustainability thing here, where we actually use the MEV to make the Oracle sustainable.
They can just do it themselves. They don't need OVO.
Sure, but we've built they haven't done it to date. You're correct. They could go and do this. But this is a little bit of an argument here of okay, I'm going to shill for a second.
No, what I'm saying is at the heart of it, they have the entire power in this dynamic. Like, if they want, they can come in and shut this down if they wanted to, or they can build something. They can just fork your code and run it themselves. Like, what is stopping you from doing?
Okay, so this is more business strategy now than mechanism design, right?
It is not. It plays into why the solution is bad because it's relying on a third party, like another Oracle, instead of like being just a MEV solutions that like, other people in this call are like suggesting, like you could do Dutch auctions, you could do et cetera. You're leveraging a third party, which at any moment can shut it down, which again introduces risks into the system.
Okay. First of all, I don't actually think Chainlink can shut this down because they publish these price feeds, a huge amount of DeFi infrastructures. Let me
in their contract. It is very possible. I know.
Let me respond to a few things here, right? Just easy, right? Let me respond to a few things. So, Chainlink price feeds are at least marketed as permissionless. Anybody can read them on chain. I am not as deep in the contract. Matt and Chris could probably ask like where the points of contention are, what they could shut down. But at a reasonable like top level, Chainlink is trying to offer their price feeds as a permissionless service that DeFi protocols can build on top of, right? Uri, your kid is cute, by the way. So we are saying, okay, this exists. It's going to the public mempool. We are building Oval, and I want to, again, reemphasize where we're coming from here. We are trying to play around and experiment with MEV capture in our ecosystem. I will be a little shilly and say, I think that's a pretty good thing for people to do and experiment with. And I think most people on this call would agree. It's like, this is a cool idea or direction. It doesn't have to just be Chainlink. Like we could in the future use Oval or Oval-like concepts to capture MEV from other sources. And it's very possible that this line of technology or thinking becomes an infrastructure for MEV capture in different ways. And I don't really know where that goes, right? We're just kind of having fun here, guys. So a good one that we're pointing to, yeah, Uri, go ahead.
All right. So first of all, like I need to wrap up. I'm over time, and somebody has been waiting for me here. But I want to say the following. First of all, I'm really glad that you're bleeding some of the MEV to the block builder and to the proposer. It makes way more sense, a lot more censorship resistant, etc. You can think about what should be the numbers, but I feel a lot better now that I know that. Also, now understanding how you do about the updates, I do like, okay, I come out of this conversation a lot happier about like how Oval is built, and it makes way more sense now. I still kind of, again, talk with Alex. Like, I think that I personally love the idea of like the ability send the transaction not through a private order flow, but send it through the mempool and kind of like when you can, not always you can, but when you can, then it makes a lot more sense. So I kind of like that, and to minimize the amount of entities in the middle. I do have my issue with the fact that by doing all of that, you basically, all your prices are stale by another 3 blocks, which isn't, oh, it's nothing, it's fine. Okay, from my perspective, I am like, there are people who can comment better on this, but that, like, I come out of it, oh, okay, like I thought this is like a major issue, the entire thing makes 0 sense. Like, no, this makes sense and that makes sense, etc. Potentially we could do better, but appreciate everybody's feedback and insight into that. I come out smarter from this conversation that I came in. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Last point, I also do think Alex from Atlas, like Fastlane Labs, I think that stuff is really interesting, and I'm actually talking to him a bunch about it. There's some cool stuff there too. But if you're signing off, thank you for engaging us. I'll go for 2 more seconds, and like I then think we should wrap this up too. So yeah, like,
thanks for inviting like other oracles to this. I think like it's not something everyone does. So props to your team for that. Yeah, good luck. I do think like OEV is a real issue, and this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you, man. And I get the other part we want to play here is like, so this is fun experimentation around MEV capture. The MEV today, the big number to go after is like lending protocols, and they use Chainlink. So the other thing we're trying to do here is just be like, okay, look, Chainlink is leaking MEV. Here's an idea on how we could capture it.
No, I definitely think we should go ahead with that pilot program. It's definitely like we should test out some of the questions we posed in this chat today and see like what results come out of it, just to see like how much of it would actually play out in practice. But liquidations are such a hard thing to test in production that it's almost impossible. Like unless real liquidations happen, how do you test it out?
One thing I wanted to say on the Chainlink, like controlling the like data supply chain and like censoring Oval in this regard, like irrespective if they could do that on the contracts or not, like one thing I think to remember, or at least like part of the way that I'm thinking about the framing here, is that Oval kind of acts as an extension of the protocol that integrates with it. So by censoring, like let's say Aave integrates with Oval and then Chainlink is like, we're going to turn this off, they're going to be breaking Aave, right? Like that almost seems like unacceptable for Chainlink to do.
Yeah, I know, but like Chainlink and Aave are very close. Like if Chainlink tells you Aave, don't do this, they will not.
Hold up. I want to just frame one thing here, like, because Ashar, you saw the draft proposal that I guess got up too early, but like, if we do anything with Aave, it should be a pilot program, tightly scoped, true experimentation, right? And the draft proposal is just proposing this in 2 of their isolated markets that are like very siloed and don't contribute risk to the broader protocol. And like, we're not here. There's no way that I want this to be contentious to Chainlink. That would be that's idiotic from our perspective. We instead want to be like right now. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just think like I'm looking at it from Chainlink's point of view, like and given Chainlink's reputation in the industry, they wouldn't leave a pie sitting on the table if they can get it, and that's what I'm alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, and I think that's also smart on your part too. Yeah, so yeah, we want to capture this MEV, and I think Chainlink needs a way to get paid, and they should do it. Maybe this is a forcing function for them to consider this sort of stuff, and if so, that's great. But we're looking forward to like working with them on this too.
Can I ask more of a, I guess, a business strategy question here? If I was a protocol, I mean, it's a good idea, it's a neat idea, but it's also pretty easy to implement yourself. As a protocol, I could wrap the Oracle and I could send these transactions to MEV-Share myself. So why, I guess, why would I not do that?
Yeah, so Repost, I think like if we go true business strategy, there's like, you could frame it as the classic like buy versus build question. Like, is there off-the-shelf infrastructure I can use versus something that I need to build myself? And that's sort of like one answer, where if we can be a super simple, battle-tested integration that has figured out all this shit that people just talked about, the censorship, the builder inclusion rates, like, and we're plugged into the searchers and the searcher network that makes this work out of the box, there's like some value to that. I think a lot of your questions on Twitter are very real. They're like, what is the right, call it rev share here? And just so you're aware, I think those are really legitimate questions. And we're also starting here. It's like, I don't totally know what the right rev share is.
Yeah, I guess
but I
just
think it's,
from my point of view, I look at it and think, I could code this whole system up in a day or two. And so I guess to me, that's part of that is like, and I should get 50% of all the liquidations for this. I don't know. It just seems a little uneven to me.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 answers here. First off, we're hiring, by the way, but no, joking aside. No, like, I look at this as being like, okay, there is MEV that's getting leaked. We all agree that should get captured. We all agree that most of it should go back to the source of that MEV. Fine. When I've talked to when I've talked to Stani at Aave about this, like, he legitimately also wants the Oracle source to get paid, so Chainlink to get paid, because it makes his protocol more sustainable. So they should get a cut of this. How big a cut that is, I mean, that's a thing that's got to get figured out. And then I think there should be a structure that's providing it too. So that's the way I look at it. Figuring out those splits. It'll be a bit of a negotiation, but I don't think my general argument is like, this is money. This is kind of like free money. It's like Aave's leaving, 50 million bucks a year hang out. And if we tell them, hey man, we can help you capture 25 million of that, pay us some, we're going to pay Chainlink some, that seems okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Should we wrap, guys?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, if you guys,
All right.
if you see, by the way, like the formulas for how much you need to pay the validator to prevent the censorship attack, they're in the paper that we put out a while ago about censorship resistance. So the 33% for 3 blocks is about right.
Well, thanks, Matt. That's useful. And yeah, on the censorship stuff, the other thing that I'd kind of point out is like, this is the type of like nerd snipey edge case stuff that is also very real. Like, I also don't pretend that it's not like, even if it's edge cases, it's important to think through. But like, I again want to frame this as like, the worst case thing that happens here is the protocol doesn't get the MEV that they weren't getting before. And maybe there's a 3-block delay. So the way I'm looking at this is like, what is the cost of this delay? And, if in the worst case, the protocol is just back to where it started, like, it'd be a missed opportunity and a way for us to tweak and improve the parameters. But I still think it's like a big forward progress.
The conditional volatility at the time when this matters is much higher than the average volatility. And what matters is the worst case, right? So while I agree with you, I think like it's also important to contextualize. This is a higher volatility time by definition when we look at when like these matter. And what matters is like the worst case, or like the 99.9 percentile worst case, right? Not the average case.
So there's actually a really cool, I think, nerdy answer to that too, that I'm actually curious what you think of. So Aave right now, and I'll just use Aave as the concrete example. They have this, 5 to 10% discount. On the more volatile assets, it's 10%. And that number is supposed to be the upper limit, so that they always make sure they sell collateral when they need to. There's an argument that with something like what we're doing, you could actually move that limit to something significantly higher, like 20%, because you're going to recapture, like you're actually going to price that discount correctly using this auction mechanism. And so there's a thought here that you could actually make the Aave protocol safer and have less solvency risk by actually having higher liquidation bonuses, and then just running this auction to correctly set the realized liquidation bonus to whatever the market clearing price for that collateral is. So it's sort of a different way of reframing your problem, I think.
Again, I mean, then you have to post more margin for the same exposure, right?
That's where I got to go a little bit deeper, because you already are posting more margin. I don't know, like, I think right now, your position is getting liquidated at like below 130% collateralization, but then your assets are only getting sold at like a 10% discount. So there actually is more margin that you could sell, but they're not doing it because they don't want to leak that much more MEV here too.
The user, like the way these actually work today is the user gets some of that money back. So like if you get liquidated 100, let's say it's 130%, they sell your collateral at like a 10% discount. You maybe there's some that goes to the protocol, but you're still going to get like 110 or 112 or something. You're not getting drained all the way to 100%. You're not losing all of your margin basically.
Oh, you could definitely sell like you could sell all the way up to so you would get like 110% of your.
So like basically Aave they don't like take you down to zero. They give you some of the excess margin back, so that you don't get penalized quite as much for getting liquidated. And so you could basically just say, in the worst case, we will actually penalize you down to zero. But in the normal case, we can sell the collateral way better at a way better price, and so you get most of it back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Said differently, like the auction mechanism for pricing the correct price to sell this collateral actually could be a new tool in like the Aave toolbox to set parameters that actually make it.
So the 30 seconds
robust.
isn't actually a big issue if you think about it normally. Like there's always a difference between off-chain and on-chain price either way. Like,
correct.
And it's significant enough difference, and it doesn't really create many problems for lending and borrowing protocols at the moment. So even if you delay it by 30 seconds, it's not as big of an issue as everyone is making out to be here. IMO at least. Yeah.
It matters for the worst case scenario, right? I think I agree with that. Like what I said earlier about the arbitrage.
Yep.
I think only exists if there's like a massive change in rates over the 3-block period, which doesn't happen. So.
Yep, Max, I agree. But then I kind of this is the other idea about how we could actually protect against the worst case scenario without making it cost in the average case because we're running the auction. There's interesting ideas there. Guys, I think we should wrap. I really appreciate Max, you coming on, repost our MEV refund, everybody else, Ashar, thank you guys. But this is cool. I appreciate the transparency in our industry and having these types of chats. And I don't know, let's keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you all.